I'm going to introduce you see our panelists here. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to introduce our facilitator, excuse me, for the hour, and she will introduce the panelists. Many of us know and follow the lead of Reverend Andrea Alexander. She's the Associate General Secretary at the National Council of Churches for Action, Associate Secretary for Action and Advocacy for Peace and Justice, say that fast 3 times, at the National Council of Churches, Churches of Christ in the USA. The NCC is a leading force for ecumenical cooperation among Christians in the United States, focusing on issues of social justice, interreligious relationships, the Bible, and Christian life. Many of us participated and were really blessed by their ministry last year, leading us and continuing to lead us through a year of commemorating the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Reverend Alexander leads the organization's advocacy efforts impacting 2 priority issues: mass incarceration and interreligious peace. Before her move to the NCC, Reverend Alexander worked in various capacities for the American Baptist Home Mission Societies of American Baptist Churches, USA. For over 20 years, she has worked on a variety of justice issues in partnership with ecumenical, interfaith, and government entities such as the Interfaith Center for Corporate Responsibility, the United Nations, the World Council of Churches, Church World Service, and others. She's preached, lectured, facilitated workshops throughout the United States and around the world, in places like Egypt, South Africa, Turkey, Mexico, and South Korea. A former lawyer, she has both her JD and BS in accounting from the University of Missouri in Columbia. Reverend Alexander also has an MDiv from Princeton Theological Seminary. She is a member of the National Advisory Board for Community Engagement in the state courts and co-chair of the Interfaith Criminal Justice Coalition. In her spare time, Reverend Alexander serves as an associate minister at Covenant Baptist United Church of Christ in Washington, D.C. I say all that to say, you know that you are in fantastic hands. I commend to you the very capable Reverend Andrea Alexander.
Good morning. So, given the time to say all of that, which, I thank God for being able to make it through. Now my computer actually died. Well, it went off. You know how it is. The little timer thing is like, you're taking too long. So anyway, I think I have something that's actually on paper. Thank God for paper. Again, honestly, I really appreciate the introduction, but there's also something to be said about people who are really doing some major work. And what we have before us, what we have in front of you on this morning are people who have their skin in the game. They saw issues, they saw concerns, and they got involved. Dr. King said once that we should see what it is that God is doing and get involved. A good friend of mine once said to me, when you're trying to decide what you want to do in life, think about what it is that makes you cry and get involved. Another really wonderful quote from Dr. King, and it's reflective of what we're talking about this morning. He says that our nettlesome task is to discover how to organize our strength into compelling power so that government cannot elude our demands. We must develop from strength a situation in which the government finds it wise and prudent to collaborate with us. That's power. And my own saying is that we do not speak truth to power. As people of faith, we speak truth in power. And that's what makes a difference in this world. So I am actually not going to spend a time with me giving you the amazing profile and introduction of who these great people are. I want you to hear from them. And so I'm going to ask each of them individually to tell us about, I will give you their names. We have with us Mr., people are not sitting in there, okay. Mr. Valerie Noden, right here, Presbyterian Hunger Program. Reverend Robin Tanner from the Poor People's Campaign. Kyram, actually, that's not Kyram. We have Rebecca. Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed Marina. We have, if people are not in your order, you're making problems for me. Marina Ornaco is with the Church Road Service movement, and she's done issues around voting issues as well as refugee, and I've told her to feel free to talk about either of those or both as she feels led to give you information. And then we have Miss Rebecca. Rebecca, what's your last name? Because she's not in this program. Heibram, who is a organizer that became involved after the Parkland shooting. So we're looking forward to hearing a young voice that's doing some really amazing things. And then we have Kyram Uma from Our Children's Land Trust lawsuit. And so we're gonna ask them as we say in the Baptist church tradition, to come in your own way. And to share a little bit about the work that you do. And I know we're humble people, but I really want you to realize that what you're sharing is not, I don't want you to be so humble that you don't share the really great things that you're doing and so that people can understand and know that God does extraordinary things in and through ordinary people. So please be very diligent in sharing how great the work you're doing and what you're doing in your organizations, okay? Yes. Uh-oh, you have to turn it on. There we go. There we go.
Hey, good morning. Really glad to be here. My name is Valerie Nodem. I'm with the Presbyterian Church, USA. I'm from Cameroon. And I'm working with the Presbyterian Church on international hunger issues. But my story started way before that. About 20 years ago, in Cameroon, I was trained as a lawyer, started working as an activist pretty much by mistake. I wanted to be a magistrate, a judge, right? When you're a lawyer, I think 95% of people who go into law school, that's what they want to do. But then I missed the entrance to the magistrate school, and I had a whole year, and I didn't know what to do with my life, pretty much. And I heard about that nonprofit, and that was the first in Cameroon, hiring lawyers, not to work in law offices, but to send them in villages and work with local communities, trying to support people who could not even access or prove their citizenship, having ID cards, birth certificates, and any of that. And I think that was a journey that took me from the capital where I was born and took me to out of my comfort zone, to the village as a lawyer. But it was also a journey that convinced me and taught me that's where the Spirit was leading me. Because the year after, when it was time to go back and do that law school thing again, I never went back. The spirit of the village was inside me, and seeing the opportunity, seeing the connections that could happen between villages and cities, and just all the potential that lies in a lot of local communities. And a couple of years after that, we started looking at, everybody comes and says, this country is so poor. But in fact, realizing by living in villages how rich it was. Cameroon at the time was producing a lot of oil for almost 20 years already. And we had a really smart president who decided, let's put all the money from all the oil away so that when we have bad times, we can use that money and re-inject that in the local economy. Very quickly, with structural adjustments, the hard times came, And people were like, where's that money? Like my father, overnight, because of the devaluation of the money, salaries were reduced in half and lost half of his salary overnight, right? Wow. So people were like, where's that money that we've been saving from oil for 30 years? It's time to put it back in the local economy. What money? The money was gone. So we needed to push the government, and at the time it was not at all possible in the country to disclose how much are you actually making from oil. We see a lot of international companies exploiting those resources, and we know the country is making a lot of money, but also we're wondering where's the money going? And that was very dangerous even to do at the time. Long story short, we started working in the country with other civil society organizations, with community groups. Luckily or unluckily, there was a huge project at the time supported by the World Bank. A lot of people before were talking about it, the Chad-Cameroon pipeline. The oil was pumped from Chad. ExxonMobil was sponsoring that project and going through Cameroon in a pipeline to the Atlantic Ocean. So we started working on that project, just looking at the social, environmental compensation, and the impact on local communities. But that gave us the connections we needed, the courage we needed, starting to talk about oil that was not ours. It was coming from a different country. So nobody really cared in Cameroon that we were looking at these issues. But that led us, and I might come back to it later, to talk about the issues that we always wanted to talk about in Cameroon. Because 10 years through that work, and with the push from international partners, Cameroon started publishing all the data about how much money they're making every year, which means now other groups are able to get that data and start challenging the government. We need more hospitals, we need more roads and all of that. And that work was only possible because we were working in solidarity with a lot of partners here in the US. ExxonMobil being a US company, from Cameroon, we had no way to access them, to push them, to challenge them. And the Presbyterian Church at the time had just started a program called Joining Hands, bringing together partners in a lot of countries around the world with Presbyterians in the US. The goal was not to say, we're gonna do it for you. We're gonna send you checks. We're gonna fix your problems. But the goal was to say, us as Americans, we're gonna look at how we might be contributing to the problems that you guys are facing. How we might be looking at our own systems here in the US so that together, we're working on those together. And that's the program that allowed us, as we were pushing a lot of things in Cameroon, we were able to rely on partners, on companions here in the US who were doing that advocacy with us. And due to that work, thousands of people in Chad and in Cameroon were able to receive compensations. And we're pursuing that work with Joining Hands in about 10 countries in Africa, in Latin America, and Asia today, bringing those two worlds together and making sure that we do this work in solidarity. Thank you.
Wow. I'm learning a lot too. So my name is Mirna Orozco, and I work with Church World Service as one of the organizers there. And I've done work around elections and electoral justice with Movement Voter Project. I always struggle with this question because I feel like the introducing yourself part, because I just feel like every year, I feel like I've lived 10 years with everything that's happening in our country right now, so it all just feels like so much. But I started organizing over a decade ago now, particularly around immigrant rights and immigrant justice. So I hailed from the DREAM movement and started organizing because I grew up undocumented and needed and wanted to go to school. So it was a very basic need that drove me to want to get involved in my community and figure out if there was a way that I could go to college. And so through that, I've learned a bunch. I still don't consider myself a professional organizer, but love building power with communities. So I currently work in our organizing department, trying to also take lessons and things that we've learned from organizing in the immigrant rights movement and also support refugee communities in organizing, particularly around everything that's been happening with the bans, with the lower refugee resettlement numbers that this administration has has cut. And so that's part of the work that I do now. And I'm also just like really excited to be here on this panel in particular because Good Trouble, I love that. So I'm really excited to be able to share with you all about that. And through that, that's very near and dear to my heart. When I first started organizing, I was one of the first Dreamers to ever get arrested for and in the push for deferred action. And I was undocumented during that time. And I remember being called rebellious. I remember politicians calling us petulant children. I'm not a child anymore, but I'm just really excited that as people of faith, we're coming together to learn how we can trouble those waters to create the world that we want to see. It's so important, especially during this time, that we kind of take to our calling and be able to stand for what we believe in. So I'm just really excited to be able to do that, tell you all a little bit more about the work that we do through the questions that we're gonna be asked. But I also wanna share something really awesome because it's part of who I am and my story and just the evolution of me and my work and organizing. I got my green card about a week ago. So I'm really excited about that. I'm no longer undocumented. I am really looking forward to what other kinds of good trouble I can get into now that I'm not as scared as I used to be.
Amazing.
So I'm Reverend Robin Tanner, and my first calling led me to seminary and came in 2006. But my second calling, and the calling that helps me get up in the morning and go throughout my day, came in 2013. So back up a little bit. I went to North Carolina for my first pastorate, which was in Charlotte. So some North Carolinians in the house? That's right. And I arrived in North Carolina at a time that two important things were happening. One was North Carolina we can't talk left and right with what happened. It was an extremist, take all the wheels out of the car, pull a U-turn, really takeover. So that happened as I arrived in my first congregation, which was a small congregation of folks from all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of beliefs. At the same time, Reverend Dr. William Barber was beginning to lead the North Carolina NAACP. And so in 2010, when I arrived, I had no idea what movement was. If you had said to me, you want to join the movement, I would have had not a clue how to answer that question. I identified myself really as a pastor and still do, but I didn't understand how deeply prophetic the pastoral is, right?
Yes.
And so in 2010, I did a little interview with a local newspaper that came in, one of those like get to know the new pastor in town things, what book is on your bedside table. I mean, really riveting material. And it sounds like y'all know that kind of, yeah. So at the end of that interview, the reporter said, well, tell me about your family a little. And I just said, well, my partner's name is so-and-so, and we have a dog. I didn't think anything of it. Yeah, so y'all know where this is going. Online comments had just started to really be a thing. And he said, just don't read the online comments. The article comes out on Sunday. And pretty soon, my congregation received all kinds of hate calls, and I found myself being both confronted with a vicious and enlivened anti-LGBTQ rising movement that had been empowered by this extremist turn in the governor's office and in the legislature. And soon enough, they were putting a measure on the ballot to amend the Constitution with one of the most egregious marriage amendments that we had even ever seen in the country still to this day. And I became engaged in the movement to fight that amendment. And that's where I first met Reverend Dr. William Barber, who barnstormed the state of North Carolina to say LGBTQ rights are civil rights. Which was news to me as an LGBTQ person. And no, really. And so suddenly I became engaged in a movement and started to understand things beyond coalition and diffusion. and what it is to join a movement and to join a family. And for civil rights to be LGBTQ rights, to be voting rights, for ecological justice, right, to be immigrant justice, for indigenous sovereignty to be tied directly with our core constitutional values, and to know that we is the most powerful and sacred word that appears in our Constitution. So it was out of this context that I got married. That didn't have to do with movement entirely. And I was on my honeymoon, and I came back, and literally as the plane was landing, I was turning my phone on to get my emails, and Reverend Dr. Rodney Sadler, who is a colleague and a mentor of mine, said, I have spent my entire life as an African-American man trying not to go to jail. And I was just arrested for trying to enter the legislature for voting rights. Will you come this Monday? So that was a Sunday. Monday I was in the State House, and from there this movement, which became known as the Moral Monday movement, was an incredible Kairos moment. I really appreciated Adam lifting up Kairos. That there, in the midst of this great injustice, there was a moment when we saw those most directly impacted by the injustice being perpetuated by our legislature and by our governor, were also being called and shaped, and the Spirit was among us. And to watch faith leaders bear witness to that, and for people of faith to find their second calling. So my second calling came in 2013. Since then, I've moved to a congregation in New Jersey. I still identify primarily as a pastor, and know that the pastoral is prophetic. That has led me now with the Poor People's Campaign and National Call for Moral Revival to lead the faith team of that campaign. And what that means is I get the honor and privilege of experiencing sometimes and learning from more often the second calling of our denominational leaders, of our national faith bodies, and of faith partners from all over the country who are engaged in this work we call movement.
Wonderful.
Hello. My name is Rebecca Heimbrock, and I'm actually a sophomore at Montgomery Blair High School, which is in Silver Spring. It's like half an hour away. I am a gun control activist, like a lot of students my age are. And the way that I got involved was after Parkland. But I think that it was a little bit deeper than that for me, because I grew up in a small little town in Maryland called Middletown, Maryland. Probably none of you have heard of it. I know that like it's pretty much not on any map, like it's fine. But it is definitely very conservative. And so my parents are very liberal. And I was raised, you know, constantly being told at the dinner table, like, this is what's right, like morally, and like this is what's wrong. So I always had a very strong sense of morals growing up. And so then when I started to go to school at Middletown, I was kind of given these different ideas of like a lot of racism, a lot of anti-LGBT sentiment, a lot of stuff like that. And it all kind of came to a tipping point when I was in, oh gosh, like 8th grade. I'm so young compared to like everyone else. No offense, but like, yeah, it is what
But look how much you've accomplished already.
It all came to a tipping point in 8th grade during the election, when all of my, like my friends were like, my parents are voting for Trump, I support Trump, I support his rhetoric. And I was like, oh my God, I need to take a step back and think about like what I believe, and like, can I still be friends with these people after they're saying like these mean things about me? That was also when I was, you know, figuring out that like I'm not straight and like all this other stuff, and then my friends are turning around and saying like we like hate gay people and like all this other stuff. So it was like a very hard time. And then after the Parkland shooting, I kind of realized like, okay, I can't just sit back anymore. I can't be passive anymore. I have to do something. So in the summer between my freshman year and my sophomore year of high school, I organized them, well, I wasn't the only organizer, but I was one of the main ones. I organized the March on the NRA, which had about 2,000 protesters in the Fairfax, thank you. In the Fairfax location alone, because we took the fight of gun violence directly to the NRA headquarters. And I also supervised the 20+ sister marches that we had around the United States, which had multiple, other attendees, so I don't have an exact number. And then after that, I've just, been organizing sit-ins and other protests and just fighting for the right to go to school and feel safe and not have a book drop and think, is that a gunshot? Do I need to go underneath my desk? Because that is what goes through my head as a student in America every single day. And that shouldn't be the reality. And it isn't the reality in other states, or not states, in other countries. So yeah, that's why I'm here, just to spread that message.
Hello. Hello. My name is Kieran Uman. Usually people spell it differently than this. That's why I think it was hard to pronounce. And I'm a plaintiff on Juliana versus U.S., which is the federal climate change lawsuit, which I'll get into more detail about that later. Maybe some people have heard of it, but if not, I'll talk about it. And I'm just waking up. I gotta say, sometimes when people ask me to come and talk about the case and stuff, I go and I talk about the case, and I meet some cool people, and then I go home. But here there's so much to listen to. So many incredible speakers. I got up at about 7 exactly this morning to go down to the breakfast for the queers. It was great. And then I went right back up and went back to bed. And then I got up about 10 minutes ago and came down here. So my brain's like slowly, it's getting there. But anyway, I live in Seattle, Washington. I study sociology. There's a couple other Seattle people. Nice, it's good city. I grew up in Eugene, Oregon, and I'm a preacher's kid in the United Church of Christ. All of that. So I grew up in the UCC, and very much formed a lot of my values and understandings of the world. And I also grew up in Eugene, which I don't know, maybe some of you know, was like kind of a central hotbed for radical environmentalist organizing, particularly in the 90s and early 2000s. So like when I was in high school, my father's an Indian immigrant in kind of our Indian family. It's all about the family and it's all about the community. We don't really talk in I, so I prefer to talk in we. Who just mentioned the we thing earlier? I like that. Yeah, I like that. And so I think like my identity is very much shaped by the people that I work with and like collectively organize with. And in high school, I was hanging out with the people who like sit in trees until they get arrested. And then because I was the only one in high school hanging out with those weird people, when a group of young folks and environmental lawyers in Eugene decided to file a lawsuit against the federal government claiming that the actions they have taken to contribute and exacerbate climate change are in violation of our fundamental and constitutional rights, they asked me to join. I'm not sure if they thought that I would be like a good figure for the PR based on my friends, but maybe they didn't really notice, and so I'm doing my best. I've got a nice shirt on today, so. But anyway, I had no idea what that meant to sue the government. Like if someone sends you, so I had an old friend from childhood who was involved with Our Children's Trust, which is a law nonprofit based in Eugene, Oregon, who's representing us, and she emails me, and she's like, hey, do you want to sue the government for climate change? I'm like, I like climate change. I'm pretty frustrated with the government. But what does that mean? And I'm still learning 4 years later after we have continuously been stalled to go to trial. As soon as we filed the case, the government kind of just thought they could brush us under the table and filed to dismiss the case. And then we said, no, we're not going to go under the table. And so it's been kind of a fight. We've had, countless hearings. People people joke that you could teach a whole class in law school on our case because it's kind of tested all of the different background, the kind of like backhanded ways of like trying to avoid the court system that the government's using against us. Because the reality is we have evidence that since the 50s, they've known about climate change, they've known what's causing it, and they have intentionally ignored the science that their government scientists have created. Not only do we have that evidence, but we also have the science and the scientists, including some scientists who used to work for NASA, who used to work for the government, economists who we're working with to develop a plan, because the environmental movement's not a new thing. It's been around for a long time, but it's always been like a Band-Aid, you know? It's been like, okay, we have this issue with like gas in the water, we've got this issue with pesticides, you know, we gotta stop using this, you gotta like kind of clean the water here. But climate change is not gonna be fixed with Band-Aids. Climate change is hurting the entire world and everyone on it. So we need to talk about like, we need a plan. And we don't know if that's possible, if that's possible, but we do have science, and the government's not using it. So what we're asking for is a science-based climate recovery plan that will get us on track to a stable level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by 2100, which according to the top climatologists that we are consulting is kind of our best shot at stabilizing the climate and preventing mass catastrophic changes far worse than anything we've seen. Not to say that things haven't already happened, and that's where our case comes in. There's 21 youth. I'm 22. I'm one of the oldest. The youngest is 11. And we come from all over the country, and many of the plaintiffs are POC, many are indigenous, and have some pretty serious stories about how climate change is impacting them now. And so that's the basis of our case. We're trying to communicate to the government in this individualist, capitalist context about an issue that affects everyone. And so we have to pretend like it's only affecting us individually, which is such a contradiction to me. It's so hard to communicate with a system that's so weird and messed up and based on white supremacy, but we'll get to that later. That's a little background. I also, in my free time, well, actually, in all my time, I live in a DIY music venue. I play in a couple punk rock bands. My life is music. I'm probably going to talk about that later.
Wow. I don't know about you guys, but there are times when doing this work, you want to just like ball up in the corner somewhere and get under the covers. But it's these moments that say, yes, God, it's happening and we can do this thing. Yeah. So a rousing amen, hallelujah. And my Baptist self might go over to the side and do a little holy dance later. But this is great stuff. I'm so excited. So what I want to do is I'm going to blend a question and ask you guys to kind of, some of you addressed this to some extent. What I want to ask is, what do you consider to be your most effective tactics in getting your message across? And who is it that you're trying to communicate with? And also, if you would, in addressing that, who are the people who you think are already with you? So it's kind of like, who are your partners, your coalition that are working? Who is it that you're trying to get that message across to, and what tactics are the most effective in doing that? If you can kind of, I mean, it's a whole lot of stuff, but try to do it in like about 3 to 5 minutes each. Let's not spend all the time figuring out who's going to say it first. Okay.
Okay, so I actually have a lot of experience in doing stuff like this. One of the ways that I communicate with people is on Twitter. Social media, dreaded social media, I know. But actually, it's not so dreaded, and here's why. I organized a sit-in in the offices of senators who have taken money from the NRA in response to a shooting in Jacksonville, Florida, right? And I thought, okay, I'll get my friends to come. I'll have 10 people tops, but it'll still be fine because we'll get our message across anyway, right? I tweeted that out on Twitter. I put out a call to action, and that ended up getting around 20,000 likes and a couple thousand retweets. And a lot of people became incredibly receptive to my message that we need to take action and we need to stop gun violence and we need to target the senators and the Congress people and the politicians who are taking money from the NRA and are literally killing people as a result of that, right? So I think that social media is an incredibly useful tactic when you are trying to communicate with people, when you're trying to put out calls to actions and things like that. And then as for like who the audience is, I believe that in my activism with gun control, the audience is young people. But young people are already with us, right? Because young people have to go to school and they understand what it's like to be in fear for their lives every second of every day until the bell rings at 2:30 and they go home, right? It's a crazy thing to experience. The people who sometimes are not with us are adults. I think that some adults don't really understand what it's like to go to school and think, is today the day that I'm gonna die, right? And a way to reach out to them is honestly to hold town hall discussions, to do stuff like we're doing right now, because that's when you can really start to have these conversations and start to open up with people. And I think that that's a really powerful way to get your message across.
Very good, thank you.
For us, most of our campaigns are structured local, national, and international, meaning in countries where we do work, all the networks are making sure that in the village where the problem is located, people at that level start having the ownership about it. And then talk about it, try to find solutions locally, and if not, go to the national level. So if you have a mining company that has polluted a river in a village, you need to start in the village making sure that people are talking about it. People are explaining how they are impacted with that. And then when they take it to the national level, is to look at, you know, what law, what policy, what practice, what contract was given to that company, what can we do at that level? And the third level is going back up and looking at where is the company coming from. Is it an international company? If so, can we engage in a conversation with the company to do that? Is it a local one? And if so, you know, what ways of engagement exist there? And it's just really helpful because, you know, at the local level, even though that initiative was started by Presbyterians, you know, our partners are working with all faith, all organizations. So the message by itself is not controlled just by Presbyterian channels, but everybody's talking about it. I think in the US, it's also really important, you know, for us to like access more faith religions and feel like you know, sometimes the feeling is that it's easier to see you know, we built a water well in Mozambique and people can see that. It's exciting. People are gonna have water. But when you're talking about these people have been claiming the right to water for 7 years. And we need to engage in the process and make phone calls and do that kind of work seems a lot more complicated. It looks like you're troubling the waters that you don't need to touch. And I feel like that's where we need to get, understanding that a lot of the work, a lot of the organizing principles that we're talking about here today take time. You know, you can build a water well in 2 weeks and it's done. But to claim people's rights, you need to be there for a couple of years. So that work takes a lot of time. I think all voices usually are, you know, welcome around the table. We've been working with farmers in India for about 20 years, talking about, you know, seed issues. We used to plant our traditional seeds, you know, sell some of our harvest, keep some seeds that we could replant. But more and more, they're bringing these new seeds that you have to buy every year. And that's killing our, you know, genetic heritage, and we need to fight that. I promise you that's not a struggle. That can be done in less than many, many, many years. So it's also being in that fight, but staying in the struggle for as long as it takes.
I also want to echo the time piece. As I shared with y'all earlier, it took 24 years for like my individual case to finally go through. 24 years. And so that's not something that you can just like walk away from, right? To be able to get some sort of rights or respect in this country. For us in like the immigrant rights movement and voter rights movement, I think one of the biggest just tactics that seems to work time and time again is direct action, right? Showing up in people's faces, whether that's elected officials or people that are against your policies, and making sure that they can't not see you. Because a lot of people, especially in this day and age where so much is happening, there's attacks everywhere, every day on everything, whether it be immigration, voting rights, climate justice, everything is being attacked left and right. And we have to make sure that people just don't forget that that's not, I feel like lately it's becoming the norm, and as other people have said, you just get comfortable. If it's not something that you experience directly, or if there's not something that you see in your personal life every day, it's so easy to ignore it. It's so easy to just be like, well, you know, tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that. And so for us, like people being able to come together, whether that be actions in Capitol Hill, whether it be sit-ins at elected officials' offices, or whether it be something else to just continuously make sure that people don't forget, that's one of the tactics that we use the most. In the sanctuary movement right now, when people take shelter in houses of worship, right, that's a huge act of resistance to this administration right now, and using our congregations and our physical spaces to be able to do something for folks to avoid deportation is also something that we've been doing a lot, and especially in these past couple of years with this new administration. So it can be an action as simple as being able to provide shelter and refuge to folks that are going through incredible difficulties. I'm coming from Texas, and I don't know how many of you have seen the news about the children, but also one of the biggest workplace raids happened just the day before, and there were 280 families affected, and a lot of congregations were able to open up their doors and shelter families that were just too scared to go back home that night, families that were separated and were trying to find their loved ones and get support and help. And so it can be something as easy as opening the doors or sitting in an office until the elected official listens to you and hears you out on what the plan is and what you're doing. And I think more and more another tactic is just coalition building. The more that we realize that our issues are all interconnected, right? Like I was an undocumented woman who was also impacted by healthcare, by gun violence, and by so many other things, mass incarceration. And the more we bring our issues together and raise our voices collectively, the more and more they won't be able to ignore us.
So at the Poor People's Campaign, we're about organizing the 140 million poor folks in our country, which is roughly, just to get a capture on what 140 million means, 43.5% of the population in the United States is currently living in poverty or are low-income workers. So one of the tactics that we use is direct action. Certainly, we led 40 days in order to launch the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival of what we called nonviolent moral fusion direct action. And it wasn't the catchiest title, but we were intentional about using those words, and in particular, I think in terms of tactics, to be thinking about fusion. So one of the things that you'll see in the Poor People's Campaign whenever we have actions, when we're in the midst of movement, is that you will see people of faith and religious leaders right alongside poor folks and impacted individuals, forming this fusion movement. There's a couple of reasons why we're using that. Much of it is drawing out of that Moral Monday experience and what we learned there. When the powers that be see us coming together, they get all kinds of confused. And that confusion isn't opening. There's kairos in the midst of that chaos, and out of that chaos can arise justice. So that's one of the key tactics that we take. The other thing, though, in fusion movement is helping people to understand, to really, because sometimes what I hear from folks is, well, where are the impacted people? Like, where are the poor folks here? And helping them understand that 43.5% means they're already in the room, right? They're in our faith communities, they're in our churches, they're in our synagogues, they're in our mosques, and reframing what we think it looks like to be poor in America today. And I think that's deep faith work that we need to do. I can't tell you how many pastors I've spoken to that are one paycheck away, right, from the edge. And so really Infusion Movement as a tactic beginning to understand that if you're 2 paychecks away from eviction or from losing your home, you have far more in common with the movement and who we consider the poor in this country than you do with someone who's a billionaire. And we gotta start shifting that consciousness in our churches.
Amen.
What's the theme of this conference again? Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I grew up in the UCC church. My mom is a minister at First Congregational United Church of Christ in Eugene, Oregon. And at our church, we let all of the seniors in high school preach a sermon before they go on to wherever they do after that. It's a nice thing to do. I think it's good to listen to the youth, obviously. But I was in a funny kind of place because I'd kind of given up the church for punk rock. And my mom was a minister. So I went up there and I was like, okay, I kind of got to preach a sermon, but I got to be honest, because that's how we do things here. So I get up there and I say, like, hey, like, you know me, I played mandolin in the church band, like, I love you all, this is my family, and like, I don't really think I'm Christian. I'm not sure I believe in God. I'm trying to figure all this stuff out, and I think I'm just gonna go to shows. I don't know, maybe the black metal beat, fake Christianity out of my head. And the response I got was, oh, this guy's really thinking, now we can engage. It was positive. People were like, all right, like now we can actually talk about real stuff. I love the UCC church, because it's living that out. Like, we gotta trouble the waters, and I think that's, if I think about like how do I try to communicate with people, bring them in and push them back. That's in our case, we filed our lawsuit against the Obama administration, and it is not a personal attack against Obama, and he even did some stuff for the climate, and we were like, oh, okay, like you seem to care, but the compromise of the political institution right now is putting us in this place where even if individuals care, it's not working, and we're kind of destined for failure. So we're gonna bring you in and we're gonna be like, this is an actual plan, and we're gonna sue you in order to implement this, because we need to sue the federal government in order to implement something that's actually gonna make real change as far as the climate goes. Pull them in, push them back. People were like, why are you suing Obama? Like, Obama's, kind of like, as far as like left and liberals go, people are like, Obama's a great president in many ways, in many problems too. But I think we can always do better, and when it comes to climate change, we can do a lot better.
Amen. Again, just amazing. One of the things that's probably everyone in this room that's involved in some way in trying to make the world better than we found it, and particularly for people like yourselves, is the grind of this kind of being an activist. The ebb and the flow, the good days, the bad days, and in those moments, like I said, when you want to crawl up in the bed sometimes and put your, get under the cover. So if you guys could share with us what is it that you do for self-care, and to keep yourself encouraged. And I see chuckles and all manners. I can't wait to hear the responses. Yeah, I can't wait to hear the responses. So if you share a little bit about how you keep going and what you do in the way of self-care and self-encouragement, and to stay encouraged. Pastor, you have the mic. You can. Oh, okay.
Okay, this is cool. Okay, so yeah, actually this issue is like very important to me as someone who, I just moved schools a couple months ago, and the transition has been very, very hard for me, especially since I did it in the winter. It kind of launched me into like this like seasonal depression, anxiety, like getting out of bed in the morning is like such an issue, right? And so that kind of like made me like put a pause on my activism, and I tried to figure out how to balance my activism and my mental health and my schoolwork. And I figured out that the way to do it is to, number one, go to school. Crazy, right? Yeah, right? And to also, like, school is important, and life is important. Activism can come later, obviously. But also, you can go to school and you can do your work, but then put some time aside to do something that you love to do. For me, that was activism. I was also watching Doctor Who because I'm a self-proclaimed nerd. Like, so just doing stuff like that, I figured out that taking time for myself and doing something that I really like and relaxing and watching a crazy show about aliens, like that's just how I got myself back in like a good headspace. So that's how I take care of myself.
Amen.
So I have 3 children, twin 4-year-olds, and then a baby who is just 10 months old. And he was born in the middle of the 40 days. Fortunately for everyone who was nervous about it, not literally in the middle of the 40 days. I did go home to have that baby. So we were not sure if he was going to be a movement baby. Anyway, but when he was 3 weeks old, I came back for the mass mobilization and the rally that was really ascending forth in DC. And at the end of the march, I sat down in one of the tents that we had, and I just watched these folks who otherwise without movement would not be connected to one another and who are now family. So I watched one of the leaders in the San Carlos Apache tribe reaching out and hugging someone from the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign, and watching the children just like run around the tent. And this beautiful breeze came through, which, you know, if you've been in Washington, D.C. Around June 23rd is something that you really experience. I talk about self-care. It's like, open the tent flaps, y'all. But as I sat there, I was holding my son, and I started to cry a little, because I think for me, as a pastor who can sometimes feel very isolated and alone, maybe that's true for some of y'all. I'm seeing some head nodding, the holy head nods. And movement is sometimes my self-care. Watching y'all remind me of what can be. That's where I get hope. I don't feel very optimistic these days, but I do feel hopeful.
Amen.
So.
Amen.
Can I follow that up? Actually, I really resonate with that, because I was thinking about that, and for a lot of people I've organized with, they see kind of like self-care as like they have to stop going to meetings, they have to sort of leave the movement, and that implies that there was some point where they entered the movement, and the movement is kind of separate from them. I started to sound like a broken record, but I grew up in the UCC church, and I never entered the movement. I was born into it. Like, I don't know how it is, but both my parents, I never really, like, they never were like, we're, activists. We're not like an activist family. It's just like every year for 2 weeks, a bunch of houseless families stay at the church, and we all take turns going and making food for them, and that's just like a normal thing. It's like when there's like marches or protests, like there's a whole group of people who go to it. When there's like all this, like I grew up, like I never had this moment. This is something when I came to college and I like met all these like really rad people who were like, whoa, I just woke up, I just like read this, I read this thing or heard this thing or had this professor and I had this awakening and now we gotta organize. And I was like, and so I'm meeting new young organizers and they're like, so what was your awakening? And I was like, I guess I don't really know. I didn't have an awakening. Like the movement is like it's how I live. Like I don't like activist. I don't like to claim to be an activist as an identity, because I think that suggests that there are some people who are activists and some people who aren't. Almost like it puts us in this direction of like essentialism. I think we all have the potential to contribute to society, and I think we all should contribute to society. If you want to call that activism, sure. But I think for me, self-care, getting back to the self-care question, is like, so if you're always in the movement, how? And if self-care for some people means leaving the movement, like where am I gonna go? And so what I found is music. And music is a way for me to process my emotions, to talk about issues, to even contribute to movements. You know, we do, you know, playing shows, like connecting people, organizing, talking about, you know, go to this protest, you know, tomorrow or whatever, like throwing fundraiser shows. Like there's lots of ways to do it, but ultimately it's art. And art, like, heals our souls. And we'd had a little UCC event. Oh, sorry, I'm coming out in the mic. We had a little UCC event, I think, yesterday, and we were listening to Sweet Honey in the Rock, and someone mentioned that a lot of African American spirituals were like had hidden messages about how to get to freedom, and like. That is art for me. Like, I need art. I can't exist without art. I never sat down and was like, I'm going to start writing songs. They just came out of me. But with all the stuff going on in my head, when I sing, I don't sound like Sweet Honey in the Rock. So I found a different genre of music. But I think, I don't know. I hope people resonate with that. Art in general, we gotta process what's going on in our heads if we're gonna, you know, live in community.
What a loaded question. I'm sitting here reflecting, because this is actually honestly something I continue to struggle with every day. And I was listening to Rebecca, and I'm like, oh, if I would have started thinking about self-care when I first started organizing, when I was also like in high school, middle school, I don't like how different would have some things turned out. Maybe I would have been able to take care of myself better, probably. So I'm just going to be really honest. Therapy has helped me so much. Being able to like give myself the time and the space to talk to someone and process everything that's going on. I consider myself an empath sometimes, and it's hard out there when you're organizing with people. I grew up poor, but now I'm in a different situation, and it's just like the guilt that I feel sometimes. I was talking to my mom like a week and a half ago when I got my green card, and realizing that she didn't have it yet, but good news, she sent me a text, it's coming too for her, so I'm so excited about that. I feel like I've been really blessed this month, so I'm just gonna like continue on that hope, but there is guilt of you know, like, oh my gosh, I organize with people in Sanctuary, so every week we have a weekly call, and we get to see each other on video. It's about 10, 15 folks who are living in houses of worship across the country, and they can't leave. And sorry, I guess this is something I'm really struggling with right now too. I now have this privilege that I shouldn't feel bad about, because I've worked my butt off, and it's been really a hard struggle, blood, sweat, and tears, literally, to be able to get, but I think about it, and they can't leave. They can't go hug their children every time they want to go hug their children. Someone's mom just passed away, and she wasn't able to be at her funeral. Somebody had a miscarriage in Sanctuary, and there's so much guilt that comes with being like, I now have this other privilege that so many people don't, and so many people deserve. And so I feel like this is a very, very important question, and the only thing that I'm going to leave with that is just giving ourselves the space and the time to acknowledge it, to sit with it, with all of the feelings and all of the emotions that come with doing this work, because it's not always going to be easy. It takes time. Your friends will come and go sometimes. everything is there. But I think some of the things that have gotten me through, besides therapy, is my faith community, and also just knowing and the sureness that you get from knowing that the promised land is there. It'll take a really long time, but we're gonna get there, especially if we're all doing it together. I think is something that just keeps me going, and selfishly also talking to the people in Sanctuary and their hope and their dreams. I feel like I fill up my own gas tank every week as well. Every time I talk to them and young people. I mean, I'm still under 30. I feel really old right now, but on this panel, but seeing my nieces and nephews and knowing that there's hope, that we're raising the next generation. Every time I see somebody ask how they can get involved, or seeing that spark in people's eyes, to know that collectively that the we can make us stronger, that gives me a lot of hope.
Amen. Thank you.
I think you guys said it all. The beauty and the danger, I think, of being an activist is that it's very often a self-driven kind of world. Sometimes you have a terrible boss who is pushing you, I want this, I want that. But I feel like very often you actually don't have that boss, but you have no idea what else to do with your life and with your time. Because the issues are in your face. If you have a cell phone, if you're watching the TV, they're in your face 24 hours a day. How can you rest? How can you go to sleep knowing that everything that you're fighting for is happening at that very moment, right? So I feel like, yeah, the danger is to continue to be exposed to it all the time. And that for me has been the harder piece at times, like completely cutting off and be like, I need to recharge and I need to come back to it later. I was traveling to Congo just about 2 weeks ago, and sometimes when I do like long trips like that, I download a lot of movies on my tablet to watch them in the airplane. And I realized when I wanted to watch a movie that 95% of what I had were documentaries. Talking about everything that at that moment I did not want to know about. And it's a difficult exercise, but I think it's something that is really, really important. This work is constant, and this work really requires being able at times to recharge as well. I've been playing tennis pretty much for my whole life, and I started just a couple of years ago naming the tennis balls. Sometimes they would be called World Bank, and I'll be hitting them and feeling good. And I think that really helps. I have a family as well, and really trying hard when I come home. I always say I'm trying to leave everything in my car in the garage. I'm going to pick that up tomorrow morning when I leave, because I don't feel like I've done it, and I learned that it's not good for your children to look at you coming home completely depressed because of your work. I want to, even when I'm not hopeful, to try to raise children who will have hope for the future. And I feel like this is not a hopeful time for a lot of us, but I also feel like, the Dalai Lama reminds us that, when you accept that you might not see the end during your lifetime, you are free. You're building your inner peace. When you're saying this struggle is going to be very long, I'm going to do my part, but I might not see the other end. That's something that I'm trying as well to teach myself every day.
Thank you. So this has been, you guys have, when you talk about processing, I have delayed reactions to stuff. I think that's the self-care for me, so that I don't fall apart immediately all the time. But it's been very, very rich, and I appreciate everything that you all have said. We're gonna allow very few questions, and the reason is because of our time, but also, in all transparency, I actually have been texting Reverend Dr. Leslie Copeland-Toon. I was like, we can't leave here this morning without praying for all activists on the ground. I love the headiness of EAD, but one of the great things is that we come here unapologetically disciples of Jesus Christ. And there is power in prayer, and there is power in our coming together and our voices in this space. I believe that when we come together and we have these moments, this is a filling station. You know, we come to this to get equipped and to meet new people and have our heads and our hearts come together so that we leave this place. We have more power when we go out, even when we feel like we're in a room by ourselves doing the various work that we do. So I'm gonna make room for maybe 2 questions. Make them good, and we do mean not having statements. And also realize that everyone is around here. You have these people are going to be around. Ask them questions, and then the rest of us, you know, be in conversation and fellowship with people while you're here, so that again we're strengthened. So where do we have our 2 questions? Oh my God!
I have a mic.
I think I saw this woman first. Mark, you okay? Mark identified who he has with the mic.
Is on? Okay. So somebody that's become important to me in my activism is Richard Rohr, and him talking about contemplative action. And I guess my question to you all is, as you've talked about self-care, there's less talk about reclaiming the Christian practices of contemplative, whether it's meditation or centering prayer. And I feel like that is something we're missing, because while I appreciate all the other aspects of self-care, of watching programs or playing tennis, and how do we as activists take the time to listen to what God is telling us and feeling the connection and the interdependence that we have to one another? So I'd like to sort of have you thought about some of those centering practices.
Hello. I think I got super emotional, but and wasn't able to also talk about this. But one of the things that I have actually found super helpful is a women's group at my church, and being able to like come together, to pray together, to listen, to study. I think that's also like kept me going a bunch. I travel frequently, so they've been amazing, and we'll like try to hold our time on a weekly basis, even via like Zoom or Skype, or one way to like be in that community together, which I think has drastically transformed just like my work and my perspective sometimes. They've challenged me to start doing like a gratitude thing every day in the morning, or like a devotional thing every day in the morning. And I used to be someone that's like, well, I don't have time for like every single thing. But being able to start even with like 5 to 10 minutes every day has also just been super helpful, and I never thought it would be, honestly, but just being able to like start the day with that has been something that I've incorporated as well, and keeping that weekly time with other women that we can like share and dig into the word, but also just to like pray for each other. Also knowing I have a group of women that's praying for me is just the level of like comfort you feel in that is amazing.
Amen.
Yeah, I think this is one way in which we can actually use technology not as a counter to contemplative practice, but as a medium that can be really important. So I have a weekly Bible study with members of my congregation, and it's over Zoom because so many of them are working or are parents of young children, or have work schedules that are late. And I'm pretty upfront with them that, yes, I'm your minister, but we're leading this Bible study together, and we begin each session by praying for one another, and then having a contemplative practice of silence and holding the silence, which sounds strange over Zoom, to be sitting in silence with people, but it works. It really does. I was pretty skeptical, but it works. And then I have a spiritual partner who's also a minister who holds me accountable, and we check in every Friday, and that's an important practice for me personally to keep. And often we use Zoom. She's on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast. So I think there are ways in which we can use technology not as a hurdle to get to contemplative practice, but as a vehicle.
And for me, I think coming back to actually work with the church was a way personally to reconnect with my spirituality. Because for years, working on the ground, I think I had gotten angry with the church, and I had left the church. So working with and for the church was a really big decision for me, and a decision that I fought until I really realized the drive to go back and bring the spirituality into that work, this work that we do. And something, just like you, that's really helpful with WhatsApp and all the other apps that we have today. There's a community of activists that we work with that, daily or weekly, we share readings from the Bible to encourage each other and just really see through the Bible who were some of those people as well who, turned the tables at time, and how we are called to do that.
Amen. Okay. Next question. This here.
Usually people can hear me without these, but that's okay. I'm a representative from the Kentucky Council of Churches, come from Lexington, Kentucky. I have worked with the Presbyterian Church for 13 years, started in '84. It is through the Presbyterian Church that I came to know about the ecumenical movement. I am Roman Catholic, and I didn't know that we talked to each other. It was really a neat thing to find out. And the ministers from the Presbyterian Church actually encouraged me in my own faith formation within the Catholic Church. So I really owe them. I look around here and I see so many young people, you all, the representatives of various places that are my children's age, which are 44 and under, and I get really excited because I have been working with the Kentucky Council of Churches now for 28 years. I can't seem to get off the board. But I love it, and it's wonderful. But in my own parish,
What's your question?
And in the council, we're trying to figure out how to get the young people involved. Okay. The invitation is there. They have new ways of doing things, and that's okay. But they've been disenchanted with the church. And so to communicate with them is very difficult. And if it's teenagers, we send notes to parents, but parents don't always tell their young people what's going on. How do we reach out to the young people, teenagers, young adults, and say there's a place for you here, and we want you to be activists. We want you to get involved in your way.
Yeah, I'm 15. I can, not to brag. That is a very good question. I would say, as a young person, one thing that really motivates me is food. And I'm not saying this to be funny. It really does. It really does. And another thing is like knowing that other people my age are going to be at an event that I'm going to be at. If there's free pizza and there's people my age, I will 100% show up, especially when there's an issue being discussed that I really care about. So I think that what you should aim for doing is, number one, making sure that there is a leader in like whatever you're trying to organize that is actually very young, 20s, teens, whatever. Right. They need to see someone that is their age leading. Otherwise, it's going to be like, who is this person telling me what to do? I want to see a friend, right? Mm-hmm. And then after that, you get connections from this young person who's going to be the leader of the group. They can invite other people. And then honestly, you just give them an incentive, free food, a movie, whatever. And then you let the conversations happen naturally. And that's what I find to work the best.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Again, I definitely agree with Rebecca. I have two younger siblings. My brother is 17, or no, he's Yeah, he's 17. And my brother and my sister's 14. And they have gotten really psyched about youth group. And not only that, but have started bringing in other people. But nobody working for the church. It's been them. And they were like, okay, well, this is actually a space where we can talk about real stuff and do fun things at the same time, which is great. I loved youth group too, but I don't think I really took advantage of it the way that I could. So I think really encouraging young folks to step up for the Strike for Climate. My mom texted me this picture of my sister and two of her friends like leading the rally. And it was powerful seeing 3 14-year-old women of color leading like hundreds of people at a rally in the climate movement. Like, we've come a long ways. And by we, I mean teenagers right now. Like, I'm not a teenager. I mean, I'm 22. And so that gets the second half of my answer, I would say, is for young adults, because that's the whole. Like, you still got teenagers in some of your churches. But actually, one other thing. We got to assert that queerness is okay. Because for our generation, I identify as genderqueer. And basically everybody in my community, the majority of my friends are somewhere. We don't say the letters anymore. It's queer. And people, I know so many people who, be it in my university community or in the punk community, who have been really hurt by the church. Who have been kicked out, who have been homeless because of their queerness. So if your church doesn't assert queerness like aggressively, the young folks ain't gonna come. And the last part of my answer to that question is more about young adults, 20-somethings, which I'm still kind of figuring out. I'm not really sure, but my new friend E had this idea that I think is a really good idea, and so I'm going to propose that, citing them, of course. And that's so a lot of groups now. So I'm on the board of directors of a law nonprofit. I also work with our Children's Trust to do a lot of work with kind of like social justice oriented like orgs, and they've started over the last couple of years hiring community organizers, field organizers, paying people, not a ton, it's not a high paying job, but paying people to be able to, giving them the platform to fully work on organizing. And that's what people my age want to do. That's what I want to do. That's what so many of my friends want to do, is like get paid to do this work. And the church is an establishment, is like has the infrastructure that's existed for hundreds of years to give jobs to people, to pay people, to support them in doing just radical work. Like my mom, all she does is what she loves. She helps people, she helps the community, and she helps the world. And she gets paid for it. She gets a salary. If we want 20-somethings to come, because so many of my friends are worried about getting jobs and worried about surviving and paying rent and stuff. So if we can just start out with just one position, just be like, okay, we're gonna pay. I don't know money. I'm terrible with money. I have no money. But that's exactly the point. If you put it up like these lawyer groups that I'm a part of, like the way that they're hip and cool with the folks is they're hiring organizers, and there's a lot of work to do. Like there's enough work to have a full-time job as an organizer, and the churches, they've got the money. So but think about it. It's like where are your priorities? Like, where are your priorities? When I pay rent, pay groceries, pay utilities, I have like an average of $50 in my bank account. Like, but it's about the priorities. It's not about the money. It's about the priorities. And I really think if we want 20-somethings to like join the church, because I don't know any 20-something who actually goes to church. Any of them. None. Zero. But I also think that church is like a really good resource to support social justice organizing, obviously. And I think we could take a lot better advantage of that resource. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that question. I really appreciate the young people who responded. But I would also say for us as a church, we need to stop asking what we need to do to get people to come in and figure out how to join where people are.
I want to add something really quickly. I'm still a 20-something that goes to church. But really, like, I think one of the things that really attracted me is, like, the church is in the middle of the marketplace. It should be where the people are at, and also, like, encouraging the multiplicity and the thoughts and the ideas and the ability to have people struggle with each other on the questions, on all of those different things. I grew up in an evangelical Pentecostal, a super conservative church, and I had all the questions and all the things, and I pushed back a ton. I've been doing good trouble since I was young in the church, and I got pushed out because of it. Everybody was like, that's too much. Like, I was trying to organize other young people in the church, and leadership positions were not available to me. I was not encouraged to take leadership. I was not encouraged to explore other pieces within the church or other ways to get connected with other young people. So I think really being able to do a lot of work on the messaging of, like, this is a place for imperfect people where we're trying to figure it out together, versus what a lot of young people seem to think the church is only for perfect people, or, like, other pieces. So really being able to, like, connect with folks and being like, it's okay if you have all of these different thoughts or things. We're in community together, we're in fellowship together, and we're gonna figure it out together. I think that's what's helped me and has kept me going, because these are people I can struggle with. I can have those hard conversations and know that it's encouraged and it's appreciated, and there's people from all walks of life. And as a 20-something that, like, has all the questions, that's really helped me in my own faith journey, and to be able to actually, like, stay in the church.
Amen. Thank you so much. This has been so rich, and again, I know we major time constraints, but what I'm going to ask right now, in addition to our panelists, I'm going to ask others who are actively involved as activists in this, doing this work with their bodies on the line, to come up front, and we're going to pray for this, and we're praying also that God will ignite others, that we too will move beyond our comfort zone. As Larry reminded us too, is sometimes in those places that we find our closest connection with God. So please come forward, those who are actively in the street doing this work, and then we're going to ask those of us who are here to, if you don't mind standing, and there's this symbolism of the Spirit of God, if you will hold your hands out, and Reverend Dr. Copeland Toon is going to pray. So many people make space for you.
Amen. This has been awesome. I was very excited.
You guys can also come to the front of so we can just kind of get a feel for who our activists are.
Yeah. I was really excited about this panel just because of what we've all just experienced together. So what was on my heart as I was listening and thinking about praying for activists is this text in Romans chapter 8, verses 31 through 39. I'm going to read it from the NRSV. What then are we to say about these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? God, who did not withhold his own son, but gave him up for all of us, will God not with him also give us everything else? Who will bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is it to condemn? It is Christ Jesus who died, yes, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed intercedes for us. Who will separate us from the love of Christ? Will hardship or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are being killed all day long. We are counted as sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through God who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus, our Lord. Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for this time of gathering. We thank you, God, that you have pricked our hearts and our minds and our very souls to do this work that you've laid at our hands. We thank you, God, for all of the reminders that you are a God of justice, a God of peace, a God of love, a God who beckons and calls us even unto you, to be restored and to be renewed, to be refreshed, oh God. A God who gives us a vision of a world that is not the one we live in, but the one that we seek to make our own. God, we thank you today because we're gathered with those who are like-minded, who also want to fight the good fight, oh God, who want to bear the banner, who want to call your people to righteousness and to justice, who want to walk humbly with you, oh God, and be restored and renewed in the work ahead. God, I pray that your spirit would rest on us, that you would stand up in us, that you would revive us even right now, that you would cover us, oh God, that you would keep us, oh God, that you would fortify our very souls. Sometimes we get weary, oh God. Sometimes we get distressed. Sometimes we are laying in a fetal position on our knees, crying out to you, God. Help us, Lord. Move in this country, move in this world. There are so many issues. There's so many problems. There are people who are hurting. We need you, oh God, even this very hour. So we ask, God, that you would move in us and through us differently today than you did yesterday. Help us to be prepared for the work ahead. Help us, oh God, to remember that we do our part, but you handle it all. We thank you, God, that we know we don't have to fix it all. We just have to be faithful in what we can fix. So bless these activists, oh God. Bless their homes, oh God. God, sometimes they're in places that they need protection. We ask that you would protect them, oh God. God, you know what they stand in need of. You know the financial resources. You know the human resources. You know the doors that need to be opened and those that need to be closed. You know sometimes, God, there needs to be a window that just opens, just a crack, oh God, that they can get through so that they can be able to move and transform things for others of your people. You know, God, what we stand in need of. Move, God, in a mighty, mighty way. We count on you in all things. Help us to rest in you. Your word reminds us that your yoke is easy and your burden is light. Help us not to carry a burden that is not our own, but to do only the work that you have called us to do. And to be encouraged by one another, to have iron sharpen iron, to have us edify and encourage one another. We know, oh God, that you have called us to this work for such a time as this. We've answered the call, we're answering the call, and so we just need you to infuse us with your spirit, infuse us with your power, infuse us with authority, that we might go forth and be able to hold up this banner called justice and peace in our land. We're troubling the waters, oh God, but we know it's you that brings healing. We're troubling the waters, oh God, but we know it's you that actually helps us to do the work. And so we're counting and leaning on you. Do it now, oh God. Do it now. And when we leave this place, God, do not let us dare leave here how we came in. But even let the transforming work of your spirit be active in us right now, that we might deal with gun violence. For God knows our children should not go to school afraid. That we can do something about the environment, God, because we know that you called us to be stewards, not destructors of your world. To do something about poverty in this nation, oh God, because we know that you love the poor, that you told us to make sure that people are taken care of, the widow and the orphan and those who will stand in need. Help us, oh God, to bring justice, economic justice in this land. God, we ask that you would help us to do something about pipelines and internationally water, clean water, oh God, clean air, oh God. There's so much going on in our world that needs our voices. And God, there are whole immigration. We know that at the border that there are people who are just trying to get a better life, that are fleeing violence, oh God, that are fleeing chaos and confusion, some of it caused by us.
My goodness. My goodness.
So we repent today as well, oh God. And we ask for all these issues that have been named and so many more. Those that have torn us apart, oh God. Those that have kept us away from each other, oh God. Help us to heal in this room even right now so that we might go forth and heal our world. We count on you in all things, God. And we bless you and thank you in advance because we know we're going to leave here differently. And we will do our part to heal, to trouble the waters and heal our world. It's in Jesus' name that I do pray this prayer. And collectively, we say together, amen. Amen. Amen.